All right, so if you're listening to this, you're probably wanting to find some new ways to think about 2 Timothy 4, 6 to 8.
Yeah, exactly. We're not going to waste time on stuff you already know.
You're here for some ideas to make your congregation really stop and think, you know.
We've got 8 sermons here, and we're going to go deep.
Some of them are pretty surprising, I think.
Definitely. So why don't we just jump right in?
That's good to me. Let's start with some sermons that took some familiar ideas but gave them a fresh perspective.
Okay.
Hope Lev's 365, they really went all in on the historical context behind that whole drink offering thing.
Oh, yeah. They pointed out that drink offerings were part of, like, pagan worship, back in the day.
Right.
And they talked about how instead of offering to some idol, Paul is saying that he's the offering, like he's pouring himself out for Christ.
Wow. Yeah, that really makes you think about the commitment there, right? Like he's taking something from their culture and turning it completely upside down.
Totally. They even quoted this early church guy, Polycarp, who said something like, "Let's all be the perfect drink offering to God."
It's like that total surrender to God.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, next we have Westwood Baptist Church, and they focused on accountability.
Oh, yeah, but not just like the normal kind of accountability.
Right.
They said, it's not just about being accountable to your congregation or even your family.
They were talking about being accountable to God himself.
Exactly. It really makes you think about the weight of that responsibility.
For sure. And they had this great quote from Tony Morita, the guy who co-founded Sony.
Yeah.
And he said something about how he felt accountable to a higher purpose in his work. And it just got me thinking,
Yeah.
how did that apply to ministry? Like, are we really working for something bigger than ourselves?
They had pastors asking themselves, what's really driving my ministry? Am I doing this for God or for myself? It's a good question for any leader, I think.
No doubt. Okay,
Yeah.
last one in this section is the Flame Church. They really emphasize God's plan and how it all worked out with Paul's journey to Rome.
They weren't afraid to talk about the hard parts either, like Paul being imprisoned or shipwrecked or people fighting against him at every turn.
Yeah, and yet somehow he still ended up right where God wanted him.
It makes you think about those times when things are just a mess,
Yeah.
when your plans fall apart and you wonder if you're even doing the right thing.
Absolutely.
They said that even when things are chaotic, God is still in control.
You can't always see the plan, but it's always there.
Right. That's a good reminder for pastors who might be feeling lost or discouraged.
So those were some sermons that gave a fresh perspective on some familiar ideas.
Now get ready for a few that really went outside the box.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
New Life Fellowship, Houston. They compared the Christian life to hiking the Grand Canyon.
Okay, wait, what?
I know it sounds a little out there, but it actually works.
Okay, I'll buy it.
So they said, you wouldn't just show up at the Grand Canyon and start hiking down without any preparation.
Right.
You need the right gear. You need to train. You need to know what you're getting yourself into.
So they're saying that the Christian life is like that too.
Yeah, you need to be
You
prepared.
need to study scripture and build your faith and have a good support system to help you.
And you need to rest, too.
Sure.
You can't just keep going and going without taking a break.
Finding those moments of peace with God amidst the chaos of life,
Exactly.
that's a good analogy, especially for people who like the outdoors.
Okay, now, for something a little different,
Okay.
where culturally this one was pretty American, you could say.
So,
They used a sports analogy to talk about purpose and perseverance.
okay, sport.
Track and field specifically, like a race.
Interesting.
They even made a joke about how the American national anthem is all about fighting.
Like it's part of the culture.
Yeah, exactly.
So they were trying to reach people who maybe don't always connect with the typical church language.
It's about finding a way to make it relevant.
Did they talk about how there's a finish line we're all aiming for?
Like in a race, you have to keep your eye on the prize.
Like that crown of righteousness we talked about before.
Right. It's what keeps you going when things get tough.
And the last one, City Church Garland, they went with, this is a good one.
Okay. I'm listening.
They compared the Christian life to bowling.
Bowling. Seriously.
Yeah, I know, right? But it kind of works.
Okay, how so?
They said if you're not careful, if you don't keep your eye on the pins, your ball's going to end up in the gutter.
So even small distractions can lead you astray.
Yeah, you got to stay focused on Christ.
They also talked about how having a good coach can make all the difference.
Like having a mentor or someone to hold you accountable.
That's a good point.
It's amazing how these sermons took something so ordinary and made it about something so profound.
They really got me thinking in new ways.
Me too.
Right.
Ready for some more?
Absolutely. Let's hear what else they came up with. It's really something, you know how 2 Timothy 4:6-8 just keeps speaking to pastors in new ways?
I know, right? We've had ancient history, sports analogies, you name it. It's amazing how each sermon finds something fresh in the passage.
I think it shows just how deep and rich the Bible really is.
You can always learn something new, even from a passage you think you've heard a million times.
Exactly. So, where did we leave off?
I think we were talking about City Church Garland and that bowling analogy, right? How we need to stay focused on the path.
Right, right.
Well, Westwood Baptist Church, they took that idea of fighting the good fight
Hmm.
and gave it a little twist.
Oh, yeah. What did they say?
They said it's not just about fighting against, like, external enemies, you know.
Like the culture or whatever.
Yeah, they said it's also about those internal struggles that we all face.
The temptations and those sinful desires we all have.
Exactly. They talked about how we need to constantly work on our character to become more like Christ.
They use this metaphor of a blacksmith, you know, how they heat up the metal and hammer it over and over to shape it just right.
So they're saying that's what God does with us.
He refines us through trials and challenges to make us stronger.
And they reminded us that Paul himself struggled with sin. No.
Oh, yeah. He called himself the chief of sinners.
So it's like this ongoing battle that we all have to fight.
And it's a fight worth fighting.
That's a good segue into the Flame Church. They talked a lot about finishing well.
Oh, yeah. They really leaned into the whole God's sovereignty thing.
How even when we mess up, God's plan is still in motion.
It's a comforting thought, right?
It is. They weren't afraid to ask the hard questions either, you know?
So-
What if I really screw up? What if I feel like I've wasted years of my life?
Yeah, those are tough ones.
The pastor used this really cool analogy of a tapestry, you know?
Oh, yeah.
How from the back it just looks like a tangled mess of threads.
Right.
But when you turn it over, it's this beautiful picture.
It all makes sense in the end.
Exactly.
Mm.
And the point was that we might not always understand God's plan, especially when we're in the middle of it.
But he's always working behind the scenes, weaving it all together.
Even our mistakes and our failures. That's encouraging, for sure.
Yeah, especially for pastors who might be feeling burnt out or like they're not making a difference.
So how do we take all of this and actually help our congregations?
That's the big question, right?
We're not just called to fight the good, fight ourselves. We have to help others do it too.
Right. New Dawn Church had a great sermon on this. They focused on the phrase, I have kept the faith.
Oh yeah, what do they say about that?
They challenged people to think about what might be holding them back in their walk with God.
Like what kind of obstacles they're facing?
Yeah, they used this analogy of runners in a race who are weighed down by unnecessary baggage.
Like carrying too much water or wearing heavy clothes.
Exactly. It's like those worries and anxieties that we carry around.
Or even just stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Like material possessions that distract us from what really matters.
It's so easy to get bogged down by all of that.
So the challenge is to help people identify those weights and get rid of them.
So they can run the race freely.
Grace Christian Church PH, they had a slightly different take on it.
Oh, yeah. What did they focus on?
They talked about the crown of righteousness and how it represents our reward in heaven.
It's a good reminder that all of this is worth it.
They compared it to an athlete training for the Olympics.
How they push themselves to the limit, all for that medal.
But the medal is just a symbol, you know? It's temporary.
Right, but the crown of righteousness, that's forever.
It never fades.
And it's a reminder that what we do here on earth has eternal consequences.
We're not just living for today.
Exactly.
Okay, last one in this section, Hope Lives 365. They talked about the phrase, to all who have longed for his appearing.
Oh, I remember this one. They said it's not just about looking forward to Christ's return.
It's about living in a way that reflects that longing.
If we truly believe that Christ is coming back, it should change the way we live.
Our priorities, our relationships, everything.
They use the analogy of a bride waiting for her wedding day.
How she's so excited and she's planning and preparing.
Yeah, it's like that.
So the question is, are we living like that?
Yeah.
Are we ready for Christ's return?
It's a good question to ask ourselves.
We've covered so much already, but we're not done yet.
There's still more to explore.
You ready for the final stretch?
Lead the way.
We're almost at the finish line of our deep dive into 2 Timothy 4:6-8. And I gotta say, this has been pretty eye-opening.
Yeah, me too. It's amazing how many different perspectives we've seen.
It's like the Bible has something to say to everyone you know.
It's like there's always something new to discover.
Definitely. But before we wrap up, there's one sermon we haven't talked about yet.
Oh, right. New Life Fellowship, Houston.
Yeah, this one was a little more introspective, you can say.
Oh, yeah. They were the ones who focused on the time of my departure is at hand, right?
That's the one. They used it to talk about legacy and the impact we leave behind.
You know, it's not always easy to think about that kind of stuff.
Death and all that.
But they actually spun it in a positive way.
How so?
They said that recognizing that our time here is limited can actually help us live with more purpose.
Like, we don't have time to waste.
Exactly. They compared it to a sculptor, you know? Chiseling away at a block of stone to reveal the masterpiece inside.
So each decision we make is like a strike of the chisel.
Shaping the legacy we leave behind.
They asked, what kind of sculpture are you creating with your life? It really makes you think.
It does. So we've talked about all these different themes and interpretations, but what does it all mean for us? You know, practically speaking.
Right, how do we take all of this back to our churches and our Bible studies?
Well, one thing that kept coming up was the importance of staying connected to God.
Like remembering that we're not doing this alone.
Westwood Baptist Church talked about spiritual disciplines, you know, prayer, Bible study, fellowship.
Like those are the things that keep us going.
She said it's not about checking boxes, it's about nourishing our souls.
Staying grounded in God's presence.
Where Colton Lee, they had this analogy of a marathon runner.
Oh, yeah.
How they need to stop at those aid stations along the way to get water and stuff.
So we need those moments of rest and refreshment, too.
Those times where we connect with God and recharge.
And Grace Christian Church PH, they reminded us that it's all about God's grace.
It's not about our own strength or willpower.
They said it's like a branch connected to a vine.
The branch can't produce fruit on its own.
It needs the vine for nourishment.
And we need Christ.
So as pastors and Bible study leaders, we need to remember that
we're not in this alone.
God is with us.
And his grace is enough.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into 2 Timothy 4, 6-8, I hope you're feeling inspired.
And maybe even a little challenged.
Because sometimes that's a good thing.
It means we're growing.
Right. We're wrestling with these truths and letting them change us.
And remember, these were just highlights from 8 different sermons.
There's so much more to explore.
So keep digging into God's Word.
And let it transform you.